Diamond Way organisation was founded by Lama Orley and Hannah Newdell, both from Copenhagen in Denmark in Europe. They travelled to Nepal in 1969 on their honeymoon, and whilst they were there they met a great meditation master called Lipinsechi Rinpoche, who was a highly regarded member of the Buddhist community and was also a very close advisor of the King of Nepal. And he became like a spiritual guide to them. They were so amazed by this man and by the teachings and the way that he helped them that they decided to return to Nepal the next year. And when they came to Nepal the next year, they were looking for him, but they couldn't find him. And at that time they were told that a great master from Tibet had come to Nepal and that Lipinsechi Rinpoche was actually attending him. So they climbed up the great stupa of Swayambhu, very famous monument in Kathmandu. And there they met the 16th Karmapa for the first time. The 16th Karmapa took them under his wing and they became his close Western students. And they studied in the Himalayas under his guidance and great teachers for approximately 3 to 4 years. And then in the mid-70s he sent them back to Europe with the idea of starting lay Buddhist centres to spread the teachings of the Kamakaja tradition.
So how did it end up here?
Good question. Well, I was living in Tokyo, Japan in the early 90s, and I received an invitation to attend a lecture by Lama Ole, who happened to be travelling through Tokyo on his way to Russia. And so in March of 1993 I attended a lecture. Lama Ole and Hannah were there, and I felt as if I was just meeting old friends, and we had a very nice connection from the very first moment. The next year I met them again in New Zealand when I was travelling there, and at that time I invited them to come to Perth for the first time. They came to Perth in January of 1995 for the first time, and they've come every year since.
Okay. So how would you explain Diamond Way Buddhism to an outsider?
So Diamond Way Buddhism is the lay branch of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of the Kamakaja tradition. So in Tibet it's said that there were 4 great schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Kamakaja being one of them, and the Diamond Way is the lay branch of that.
So you're a teacher here? Is that?
I'm a teacher here, yes.
How did you
lay
first
teacher.
encounter with what was your first encounter with teaching here?
So Lama Ole and Hannah asked me to represent them in the Kamakaja tradition in 2005. That involved giving some talks within the centre and also at some of our centres around Australia. Then some years after that, Lama Ole asked me if I would travel internationally. We have 600 Buddhist centres, more than 600 Buddhist centres around the world in the Diamond Way tradition. And so we need what we call travelling teachers to attend to those centres, give lectures. And so I started travelling from there. I've travelled to America, Canada, Russia, New Zealand and Western Europe.
So there's, like, we all know there's many different traditions in Buddhism. What makes this different to the others?
This is Tibetan Buddhism. So within Tibetan Buddhism there is a slightly different emphasis on the Buddhist teaching. Some have a more scholastic approach and some have a more meditative approach. So the Kamakaja tradition through the 16th Karmapa and the 16 Karmapas are renowned as meditators. Meditating, taking retreats, practicing deep meditation is highly regarded. So that's the tradition that we carry and hold to this day, and that's the tradition that we pass on through our centres as well.
So how do you think that this helps the community in general, such as like through mindfulness or stress management kind of thing?
Diamond Way Buddhism has been embraced by many, many people in the West. I think that many of them are somewhat disaffected with their traditional spiritual traditions, and they're looking for something that has some relevance or meaning to their life. The Buddha's teaching is always relevant to people. It's a very, very profound thing. And what we try and do is present the Buddha's teaching in a way that's useful and understandable to modern lay people. The way that we do that is by giving meditation teachings, courses, offering retreats. We have many retreat centres where people can take time out from life to make meditation retreats. where many of the courses are very large. We have families, children are invited, they're encouraged to attend. So we want people to feel included, not excluded. And then on top of that, Lama Oli teaches meditation so that it can be useful in everyday life for people.
Yeah. So how can this be practiced in the social and work environments?
Meditation can always be used, no matter what the tradition is. It's like a shining diamond that can be used in any environment. Mindfulness is the ability to hold the mind one-pointedly and to keep it in a calm, clarified state. From that, one can then gain control over one's disturbing emotions. If one is not creating a drama within oneself and with one's life, then one has a great deal of power and energy, not expending that energy on their own inner turmoil, and then one can share that energy with others. One can be very useful in the world when one's not spending so much time on their own inner trips and upsets.
What would you say is the main objective of this organisation?
The main objective is to present the teachings of the Buddha in an accessible fashion to lay people.
What are the future plans to promote this?
Well, we've just moved into our new centre here, and we have council approval to develop it as a place of meditation for the public. So that's our plan. We're going to present it as a place where people can come and meditate, where they can receive the Buddhist teachings, where they can conduct retreats, and generally be an asset to the community. I would say that the first wave of Buddhism came with a cultural bias. It was people for whom Buddhism was part of their natural cultural heritage, and they brought it with them. There were some early Western practitioners, such as Ajahn Brahm, a very famous teacher in the Theravada tradition. And I think that then, as people have seen it grow and develop in terms of temples and centres, it's become accessible to ordinary everyday Australians. And I think that they've seen that, that it's warm, welcoming, and they've embraced it. And more people have been drawn to the teachings of the Buddha because it's accessible for them. They don't just think of it as an Indian or an Asian religion. They see it as something that's really valuable within their lives, but also within the Australian culture. We hear about mindfulness teachings being used right throughout psychology these days, for example, as a practice for helping people work with their inner stress and turmoil, and also develop a calm and clear mind. So people are becoming very accustomed to the idea that meditation is a very useful tool. I think it's very important that people see that Buddhism is something that doesn't require anything special. One doesn't need a special diet, special clothes, special behaviour. Buddhists are integrated within the community. They're ordinary, everyday people, but with an extraordinary teaching from the Buddha. It's something that's very special and very precious and can be really used to benefit people very much. That's what I think, yeah. And so I think that if we ourselves are shining examples of the Buddha's teaching, then people are inspired when they meet us and they think, I would like to be like that. How did you become like that? And then they seek out the teachings of the Buddha because they're inspired by the people that they meet. They're turned on, not turned off. I think people have had enough of dogma, hatred, patriarchal lineages. I think that women feel that they would like to embrace a deep spiritual life, and they're looking for something that recognises them on an equal level, and that's what we can offer them as well.
Suppose you have a visitor who comes who wants to know about Buddhism, don't know much about Buddhism. What would you advise them?
Well, first of all, I would always say, and this is what my own teacher says, give them a warm welcome. Make sure that they're warmly welcomed, because for them to come to a Buddhist centre is a huge step for them. It's one of the most difficult things they may ever do, because what it means is that they're admitting that they're looking for something more in their life, that what they have at the moment isn't fulfilling or fully satisfying them. It's an acknowledgement of some inner need. And so we need to be very warm and welcoming to them and give them the chance to be embraced in that journey and that search. Having made that first step, then I would say we don't want to overwhelm them either. The Buddha's teaching is very vast with many, many levels of understanding. Of course, it has its own language. If we overwhelm them with language and terms and ideas, then it can be very off-putting. So I think it's important to keep things very simple for people from the beginning. refer them to some quality reading is very important, to give them some basic meditation practices. Once again, we're not trying to overwhelm them, but just give them a taste of their own inner peace and joy, which is attainable. And from there, once people see that it's valuable, then they themselves will be inspired and they can seek more and more within the vast array of the Buddhist teachings.
A lot of people are moving away from religion. How do you think this will impact on Buddhism?
I think that it's already showing up because we're one of the fastest growing religions in Australia. I think that people are moving away from traditional, perhaps even the Judeo-Christian religions. There have been many scandals within organised religion and people are very disturbed by that, very disappointed by that, I think. And they're seeking something that is not part of that hierarchical system, which they see as damaged or broken. And also I think that they see that Buddhism is something that's very relevant to their lives. They're understanding that meditation, for example, is a really useful tool. They're understanding that Buddhism is something that easily integrates within your life once you gain a basic understanding of it. And I think that that's why people are actually moving towards these ideas, not away from them.
Statues,
okay.
you see them in many shops and houses, there's some Bunnings. It seems to be everywhere. Why do you think that might be happening?
I think that many people have travelled to Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, and they like the culture, they feel very comfortable in the culture, and they see that Buddhism is a very important part of that culture. So they identify strongly with the Buddha forms from those cultures, and they understand that the Buddha forms represent something special, something peaceful, something deep, and it's a way for them to incorporate into their lives from some outer experience that they've had. I think also for some people it'll simply be a recognition of previous experiences. They're turned on to the statues because in previous lives they've had that experience with Buddhism themselves. So it's like coming home for them. They see the statue and they simply identify with something that they've known previously.
Nowadays we hear a lot about mindfulness. It's being taught in schools and in businesses. A lot of science is behind it as well. Do you think that might have any impact on how Buddhism is taught or spreads?
I think that taught properly, it's an incredibly powerful tool for benefiting people in their lives. I think that the people teaching it need to be well experienced. That's very important. We don't want just it to become like a pop culture or pop science where we say we can fix all ills through mindfulness, because that's clearly not true. For example, a psychologist needs many years of deep training in order to engage with patients, and mindfulness is a tool in their basket of tools that they can use towards that. So it's not a panacea. Having said that, it's a very powerful thing once people are taught to use it properly. Yeah? Mindfulness gives people the ability to separate themselves from their disturbing emotions, the upsets of daily life, to find some inner peace and calm, even if it's just for a short period of time, and for them to understand that the turbulent thoughts and feelings which bring them so much angst aren't actually lasting and real, that they will actually dissipate and disappear, and they can find some peace and calm within themselves and understand that actually is their own true nature. And so by constantly working with this idea of mindfulness, it can bring about great benefit for people in their lives.